Hey, Splendid here. Today I want to talk to you about the change of direction the franchise has taken in reference to the portrayal of war itself, specifically looking at the North Africa campaign and the decisions they made in the portrayal of the conflict, but more importantly, the soldiers themselves. Humans are captivated by war, specifically in the media that attempts to capture and portray conflict at its core, be it a book, poem, film, or game. Over 2,000 years ago, Alexander the Great was learning about war and loss from the Iliad, created by Homer. The haunting but heroic poem, The Charges of the Light Brigade, still makes men shudder.
Cannon to the right of them, cannon to the left of them, cannon behind them volleyed and thundered. Stormed at with shot and shell, while horse and hero fell, they that had fought so well came through the jaws of death.
And in more modern times, All Quiet on the Western Front, written by Eric Maria Remarque, has had 3 theatrical releases over the last 100 years, captivating audiences with its protagonist's transformation from an innocent child to a hardened veteran. But why are we so captivated by it? Well, there are many reasons. Some people want to understand it. Some are thrilled by it. Others want to learn about the history. But my personal favorite is the change found in the conflict. The change of an individual's inner core. The change to their morals and their principles that made them the good person they once were. Paul Bammer goes through a sort of shell-shocked metamorphosis as he survives one day to the next on the Western Front. He is changed by loss. Loss of his friends, loss of hope, loss of purpose and principle. Just as Achilles loses his principles after the loss of his friend and brother in arms, Patroclus.
Hector cut his throat.
Stop! Don't!
In the early stages of the war, he can be found honouring the burial rites of the fallen Trojans. But the terrible loss of his friend sends Achilles in such great despair, he doesn't just kill Hector, but he mutilates his body in an attempt to prevent him from entering the afterlife whole. But he is later found changed, grieving over Hector's body and referring to him as a brother.
We'll meet again soon, my brother.
These stories are as old as time and can be found in endless media, including Company of Heroes. During the end of the Opposing Fronts campaign, when Wolfgang finds his new perspective on the war after the loss of his brother, he begins to challenge the ideologies he used to so firmly believe in.
You were right. Where have we gone?
The service. Aldrich died for our country.
Tell me, sir, do you honestly believe we still have a country?
I don't know, son. That is for the gods to answer.
It's moments like this that elevate Company to more than just a fast-paced RTS game, but also a platform to tackle difficult perspectives the conflict has to offer. Okay, let's take a look at how the Africa campaign in COH3 portrays war and the soldiers in it. So it's July 2022, and everyone is mega hyped at the mere existence of COH3.
Woo! Yeah, baby! That's what I've been waiting for. That's what it's all about. Woo!
And the possibility of the North Africa campaign. And then they release this trailer.
We heard them first. Distant thunder, like a storm among the mountains. Iron beasts, tearing through our land, bringing fire and destruction. Life had changed.
In this depiction of war, we see no soldiers. Both the Allies and the Axis take the form of iron beasts, terrorizing the land and the life of the Blue Scarf Lady, who takes the form of our protagonist through this depiction of the North Africa campaign. So right away we can see the use of symbolism here, opposed to the more traditional narratives of the previous game. She is terrified of the vehicles and holds her scarf, which is like a visual symbol of her father, close to her chest. The game's focus is more in like a metaphorical direction instead of one focused on the perspective of the soldiers. I think it's important to ask, what is the purpose of this trailer? Who is it for? Who is the target audience? What is its purpose? Its purpose is to sell us COH3, to get us hyped and excited for the game. Its target audience? Mostly men, gamers, people who are interested in history perhaps, fans of the franchise or the genre, etc. As we can see from the dislike ratio, it's totally missing the mark from a marketing perspective, completely missing its target audience, and forgetting the tone of the original game, of which I always felt provided a kind of boots on the ground perspective, to provide us with an idea of what it must feel like to be there, with the use of like shaky camera on the ground with the troops. It also manages to do a sort of disservice to the men and women who fought in this conflict, by portraying them as iron beasts instead of people. I think it's important to remember that the vast majority of these soldiers were once normal people living out normal civilian lives, and then they were thrust into exceptionally difficult circumstances in one of the most challenging times of human history. Depicting them as beasts and terrorizing machines is unacceptable to me. The franchise used to depict these people as heroes. After all, that's what this game is about, is it not? Something the franchise used to know.
Captain Cutting, tell the General he now has come.
This approach creates this sort of uncomfortably obvious disconnect between the missions themselves and the dialogue Blue Scarf Lady has between the levels. It sort of feels like, you know, you've just finished orchestrating this great defense in a town against like this massive British assault, but then it cuts and it's like, better listen to how scary the war is from Blue Scarf Lady. It just feels like an empty and barren attempt to force a safe/neutral civilian perspective onto an audience that cares very little for it in the context of the medium. We can really see this shine through on the likes/dislikes of the video and the comments below. And I'm not saying this type of perspective doesn't have a place in video games. Remember This War of Mine? Fantastic game where this kind of civilian perspective caught in war really shines through the game mechanics and story of the game.
A kiedy przyjdzie także po mnie zegarmistrz światła purpurowy, by mi zawełnać błękit w głowie.
However, in a game like COH, it just feels forced and sort of unwelcome. I made a post on the COH subreddit to gather your opinions on the matter, and it's fair to say most people had other desires for the campaign with a strong preference on a soldier's perspective. In the previous iterations of the franchise, the soldiers themselves were conduits of storytelling. You, the player, would perceive the hardships and loss through them, just like you would with Paul, Brahmer, Captain Miller, or Achilles. So let me ask you this. How would you depict the North Africa campaign? If I was a betting man, I'd bet blue scarves don't enter the picture at all. However, how would you fill that space? The theatre has so much to offer in terms of history and theoretical exploration. The desert rats holding out in the siege of Tobruk, the desert fox master planning some panzer tactics, the Battle of El Alamein, the SAS blowing up planes behind enemy lines.
Sir, they're unarmed!
Or the defeat of the Italian forces near the beginning of the campaign. It's such a target-rich environment for so many compelling stories. It really feels like Relic were grasping for defeat in the jaws of victory. It would be a crime to talk about the campaign without a mention of the quality, or lack of the animations. It's a stain on the soul of a once great franchise and its reputation for its solid cinematography and classic approach to storytelling. Its cheap illustrations of Blue Scarf Lady and her father are objectively the poorest quality scenes in the franchise. Just to be clear, this type of animation can be effective if done properly. Look at Max Payne, for example. It has that similar storyboard graphic novel type animation, but it works well within the context of the game. It fits in with the style and the noir theme of the game.
I had my doubts about the cleaners spying on me, about Mona. According to Vladimir Lem, the mob captain Vincent Cognitti is behind the hits. Seems he's made a deal.
COH3 never seems to hit that mark, as it feels like a slow and boring conveyor belt of images with a voiceover over the top. I'm not a whiz kid at editing or anything, but it's really easy for me to swap some COH1 footage because it's so well animated and shot. It's an absolute joy to work with. You can really tell that the previous teams had a real passion for cinematography and what perspective shots worked well within the subject matter. You can really see the stark differences in quality here. You can feel the lack of passion, perhaps a lack of focus or energy, a lack of understanding of what the player wants from this experience in this campaign. I mean, just look at Rommel. Rommel looks like a really inappropriate character on a kids' TV show here. It's so strange. Well, how do you feel about it, co-enjoyers? Would you prefer a return to a more traditional form of storytelling in Company? Maybe you like this new direction, but prefer they develop it further, or perhaps you want a completely original take on the subject. Anyways, that's all from me today. I want to thank my friend Just and you for helping me put this together. It's always a pleasure, never a chore. Peace.
That's it! They're on the run! See? Or something stronger.